Welcome to Reddit Quests. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more videos. Redditors who are rich, how did you get there? Story 1. Got a degree that gave me a decent living, enough to buy a small fixer-upper house as a single person. Married my partner who, like me, had a decent living and a small fixer-upper house. Instead of selling the houses and getting a finished larger house, we stayed in one, rented the other, and did a lot of DIY. 2-income family. Spent a lot of years wrangling work hours, so we used minimal daycare. Refinanced 30-year mortgage of 1 to 20, made extra payments on the other, lived within our means, credit card only for emergencies, fixed cars instead of new ones. We live in a very expensive housing city. We've got 2 paid-off houses, 1 pension, and 1 decent 401k. We couldn't do it now, not with our middle-class jobs and the price of entering the property ladder. Story 2. I bought a house in Oakland for $375k in 2013, sold it for $700k in 2019. I used some of that money to buy a 2-2 condo in Houston for $72k cash in 2019, sold it for $129k in 2022. I also bought a Texas mansion for $384k, $105k down in 2021. It's worth about $550k, $600k. I have renters in there now. I am pouring in $215k cash for a granny unit behind my current house. With $401k and some money that grew from my Oakland sell, I turned into a millionaire at 45. I am 47F now. I did all this as a single mom and had about 5 different jobs, laid off, fired, quit, etc. Never making more than $87k salary. I was never smart with money and I barely graduated HS. I was in the 4th tier. It took me 7 years to graduate college. It is all about luck, I tell ya. Story 3. Time, patience, investing consistently and unemotionally. Avoid fads and get-rich-quick scams. Realize that time and compound interest will do much more than hot tips and day trading ever could. Spend less than you earn. Story 4. When my wife and I graduated from college in 1973, we had $20 between us the day I got my first paycheck as a brand new engineer. 4 months later, she got a job as a programmer. For the next 36 years, we lived below our means, saved 25% of our income, invested for the long term, and avoided debt if any kind except for a mortgage which we aggressively paid off. We retired at age 59 with an income of a low 6 figures. We are the millionaires next door, except no one knows that. Story 5. My dad put himself through college in the early 80s while owning a home AMD supporting my mom, brother, sister, and myself working giant. He started in programming and switched to IT just as computers were primed to take over. Got a decent gov job at DoD and was established with good gov contacts when I was graduating high school in 2001, just when the internet was taking over. And 9/11 happened, making IT and security were the most important priorities to a gov about to spend unlimited dollars to keep America safe, right when he was bidding for contracts to his former DoD co-workers. Not to mention the home I grew up in that he paid $140k for was worth over $500k if not more when he sold just before the 2008 housing crisis. Never once discussed us going to college or help us open a bank account or gave us an allowance to learn about money even. Married a Russian woman who won't even allow him to have pictures of us in their home. Put her through nursing school and opened a medical office for her to run, that doesn't make a profit or even break even, while she took out student loans to put her son through college when he moved into their home from Russia after they got married. Her son's girlfriend also lived there while she went to school, and when she finished she dumped the son and moved out on her own. Meanwhile, he talks to me like I'm some kind of idiot for working construction all my life, even though he made me move out at 15 and I had my first son a few years later and I can't afford to buy a home in my area. I tell him all the time if only Giant were hiring again. Story 6. My dad put himself through college in the early 80s while owning a home AMD supporting my mom, brother, sister, and myself working giant. He started in programming and switched to IT just as computers were primed to take over. Got a decent gov job at DoD and was established with good gov contacts when I was graduating high school in 2001, just when the internet was taking over and 9/11 happened, making IT and security were the most important priorities to a gov about to spend unlimited dollars to keep America safe, right when he was bidding for contracts to his former DoD co-workers. Not to mention the home I grew up in that he paid $140k for was worth over $500k if not more when he sold just before the 2008 housing crisis. Never once discussed us going to college or help us open a bank account or gave us an allowance to learn about money even. Married a Russian woman who won't even allow him to have pictures of us in their home. put her through nursing school and opened a medical office for her to run that doesn't make a profit or even break even, while she took out student loans to put her son through college when he moved into their home from Russia after they got married. Her son's girlfriend also lived there while she went to school, and when she finished she dumped the son and moved out on her own. Meanwhile, he talks to me like I'm some kind of idiot for working construction all my life, even though he made me move out at 15 and I had my first son a few years later, and I can't afford to buy a home in my area. I tell him all the time if only Giant were hiring again. Story 7. Not me, but a family member. He's worked in sales and banking for close to 20 years now, and he's built a very good book of business. His wife also works in sales for a tech company that all of you have probably heard of. She routinely would get awards for being the top salesperson of the year, and they even flew her and her husband out to Italy as one of her rewards for crushing her quota. IDK how much they make per year, but they live in a 1.6M house and just bought a 3M vacation house. They just bought a new 400K RV. Both of their cars are worth around 90K each. And they even bought a van for 100K, as well as routinely go on vacations that probably cost at least 20-30K. He's also part of an investing group and routinely flips houses, at least he did before the real estate prices skyrocketed. Story 8. Married a woman who was good at finances and put mine with hers to invest in rental properties over time, that and maxing out 401K every year. I don't feel like 1M in equity is rich, appreciate the compliment though. Also, you wouldn't know it by taking to me or my wife. My vehicle is a 2007, it has rust holes in it. My wife's car is a 2015 midsize SUV she bought used. We don't have new cars, a pool, or a huge boat, or a lot of the dumb shit that falls in liability category. I was facing layoff in 2008, I had a good job at the time, like now, vowed never to be caught with my pants down again, due to the fact that I couldn't save or manage money. So I found and married a woman to do it for me. Story 9. Graduated with engineering degree 19 years ago, lived in a trailer home I rented for $400 while bicycling to work. Purchased a condo that was the width of a parking space and paid it off in 1 year. Purchased 2 more condos and became a landlord. Unfortunately, I'm extremely bad at being a landlord, otherwise I would have a lot more money. The condos returns just enough money to justify their existence. Moved to a different city and bought a condo to live in during the housing crisis. Continued to bicycle everywhere, live in this cheap paid-off condo, dumps by salary into 401K. Bought a house at the tail end of the housing crisis. Sold most of my properties but bought another one because I was still not convinced that owning property wasn't the get-rich-quick scheme everyone says it is. Basically 19 years of living as cheaply as I can, including living in 1 room of a house, while renting 7 rooms out to cover the mortgage, or living in a box in the living room of a condo I owned while I rented the bedroom to cover HOA dues and taxes. Nowadays, between the 401K and the value of the few properties I have left, I'm worth over $1 million. That said, I now have children and my properties continue to not be able to cover their costs. So I'm living paycheck to paycheck while trying to figure out if new management of the properties will make a difference, or if I should sell them all and take my chances on the stock market. Story 10. Me and my dad started with property development renting in 2010. We don't spend extra money and we just reinvested all our profits into buying new properties and also using the previously bought properties as collateral. So it wasn't the safest route, but we also do a lot of the renovation work ourselves too, which helps a ton with keeping the costs down. So during my 20s, that's all I did. Work like a donkey with next to no social life or going on fancy holidays. As of now, we have 18 apartments where we live. I'm pretty much semi-retired at 36. We are maintaining what we have and expanding at a way slower pace. I work on average like 15 hours a week these days. This lifestyle isn't for 99% of people though, it takes a lot of sacrifice. Story 11. Got insanely lucky between 2012 and 2022. Incredibly bull run on the market. Got insanely lucky by shooting a few darts in the market and exiting on time in, or a tad early, in a few key investments. Bought some real estate between 2016 and 2020, in Canada at a ridiculously low rate, and got a good corporate middle-upper class career with a SO who has a similar background. Not rich yet, as in I don't have FU money, but it is clearly within grasp in a few years or so. Story 12. The easy part was that my dad paid 100% of my college and board. He was born poor BTW. So at 23 I had a degree with no debt. I took it from there. Took 3 jobs and 5 wires to get a good one with opportunity, worked harder than anyone else was willing to, and longer hours. Then started my business that I've run for 14 years now. Bought a home at the real estate bottom back in 2010. paid a 13th mortgage on it every year, then was lucky to refinance to a 15-year mortgage at the interest rate bottom. A good bit of that equity is in my home. Story 13. One thing I learned about millionaires is that they never stop spending for things that must give a return. You will mostly likely only be able to spend little for yourself if you wish to keep the status of a millionaire. One example is buying a dream car worth $100 if not millions of dollars. It would be a project spanning for months and years just to stay financially stable. Of course, there are smarter ways of dealing with this, but most easy money methods require focus, attention, and your caution. Story 14. I was very lucky to have some great jobs and very favorable sequences of returns on investments in houses. I saved a lot, invested it well, and lived way below my means. I did this for a long time. I took a couple gambles in the stock market and got lucky with those. I married a woman who ended up taking over part of the family business and continued to stay the course on investments. Eventually, it just didn't make sense to work my very good corporate job, so I started my own company. Story 15. This question gets asked often. This is my story, edited from a prior response a year ago. I'm a self-made multimillionaire. Net worth is $1M and $10M. I came from a lower middle-class family. Both my parents grew up in the 30s depression and came from poor families. I have memories of my mother crying late at night in the mid-70s when I was a child, and found out as an adult it was over not having enough money for bills at the time. Inflation got crazy. I suspect most will have a similar story to mine: luck and hard work. The TLDR version is I started my own company in a technical field that eventually became very successful. The backstory is that I did the same work for others and figured out I'd be better off on my own. And the last company I worked for changed their minds about the business and laid myself and coworkers off, and it ended up being a huge gift. That's the luck part. Once I was on my own, so to speak, it was make or break, and I put in 60, 80-hour weeks about 40 weeks a year, and kept it up for years, making sure I had the best product and customer service of anyone in my particular specialty. Starting from scratch, it would be hard, and mostly because I'm older, I'm not sure if I could do it again. Though if I was 30, I don't doubt that I could. I will say for certain it doesn't involve working for anyone besides yourself, unless you're using short-term employment for someone else as an educational tool, learning a business you don't know anything about, for example, before moving on to your own business. Simply put, if you work for someone else, all the profits of your labor are going to them, and not you. You are an expense to them, and they're in the position of deciding how much of the gross profit they'll spend on you as an expense. It doesn't matter how good of a company or boss you have, that's how the accounting works. If I were starting from scratch, I'd still be going after something tech-related. Emerging, high-growth fields that would have my eye would be robotics or data mining analysis. From my past experience, I'd also be very mindful you need something that scales well, for example, generates more profits and less expense as it gets bigger. For a simple example, compare an auto mechanic to an auto manufacturer. The mechanic can only work 12, 16 hours a day. His earnings scale with his hours. A manufacturer can design something once, pay for tooling once, and profits scale up far faster than the fixed costs do. Software and software tools are similar. After the fixed costs, the incremental profits per unit sold scale up fast. Story 16. I got rich by making a lot of rich people rich and happy. Literally, I started working for a stockbroker at the City of London, made shitloads of money for the millionaires who used to trade with my firm, at this point making about $150K before bonuses. Took a part of the clients and their loyalties with me to a hedge fund, got a great job, pay $275 before bonuses. Worked at the hedge fund for about 2 years and walked out with a couple of mil in hand as bonuses. With a few mils in savings and F&F, I started my own fund. 1 year through managing money for people, I raised more $100 mil of AUM. Count stands at about $290 mil today. Not very rich, but I guess rich enough to be accepted here. Story 17. About 10 years ago, I had just graduated college with a theater degree. I had dreams of becoming a stage actor. Nothing big, but I was satisfied just doing local productions that would pay me something to live on. I was able to get a few gigs here and there, but nothing steady. Still, I was able to pay rent, buy cheap food, and go drinking every once in a while. Then, 2008 happened, and any and all work available dried up completely. I worked retail for a while, but got laid off after a couple months. Eventually, I was flat broke and spent my last few dollars on some apples from the grocery store. This was during the summer and there was a local farmer's market on Sundays. I had a crazy idea to sell these store-bought apples as some kind of small, homegrown, artisanal gardening apples. And surprisingly, people bought them for $3 an apple. The next few weeks, I bought even more apples and started selling them, gradually getting more money, and it wasn't long before I was making enough to actually barely scrape by. Then I won the lottery and put all of that apple shit behind me. Story 18. Story 18. I will give you a comparison of me and my best friend. We both came from AVG income families for Florida. My mom is a waitress, his was a librarian. My dad worked on car washes, his worked at a county water treatment plant. Neither family helped us out with money towards cars, college, etc. Just your basic clothing, food, home. We both had part-time jobs usually at the same business, making same money in HS. At 18 in 1998, we started our first business together that drew the attention of a toy store which threatens legal action over our name. We closed that business down in under 3 months. When we graduated, we both went to the local community college and worked usually full-time for a local construction company. I got 2 AA degrees, he got his in construction management. In 2000, I started another business for computer repair, and in 2001 I started another business for real estate photography and virtual tours. He was busy getting licenses and certifications for his line of work. By then he was a superintendent or assistant superintendent, I can't remember. 2003, we started another business together. This one was for citrus sales and Miss C items. The main idea behind it was to get in bed with the primary owners of Grove, work hard with them, and when the land value was right, switch it from a Grove to a land development. I tied up all savings and took out a, to me, at the time small loan of $50K. 2004, Florida was hit by several hurricanes which nailed my city. I found out that I wasn't properly insured and diversified against hurricanes. When there is no power, there's not a large call to fix computers. When most of the homes in your city have tarps for roofs, realtors don't need photos. So I closed down all of the businesses and took a job with my largest client where I worked for the next 7 years. During this time, my friend worked and got all the licenses and certifications you can pretty much get for construction. He worked as an estimator and practically ran a construction company that did probably 50+ million a year in condo and home construction and was paid, I think, shit for it. I think he topped out $85K when the downturn in construction hit. Somewhere in there he started a construction company but closed it down due to not having enough time to run it. I think around 2008-9, his employer closed the construction end of their business and changed to a restoration company chasing hurricane damage ECT. They did that for 1-2 years and then retired and closed that down. During that time he got all the licenses you can for that field. 2012 or around then, he started his own restoration company and worked his ass off. If he worked less than 100 HRs every week, I would be surprised. I didn't see him or really talk to him for the next 3-4 years. He would take on the hardest jobs, guard his name and brand like they were a baby. He kept every promise no matter how much work or money it cost him. He started out doing anything, mowing lawns, taking any job that came his way. I couldn't believe it at the time. He'd do it all himself with a helper or two. I moved away and bounced around the country taking jobs that paid well for IT work during this time. I flew back for his wedding and we caught up. Eventually he was up to 8 or so employees and he called me up and asked if I would come work for him. I kicked the idea around for a couple months, then I finally said screw it and took a 50% pay cut, changed my career to something I hadn't done anything with in 10 years. By this time his company is the biggest and best in the county. He has great plans, work ethic, and wants to eventually turn the business into a franchise. Still tons of opportunity. Story 19. Although I've lost it now, I got rich by doing ed in banking before 9/11 in London. The banks paid stupid money for someone who can run a server on a 2-week contract. You could easily make pound 200K a year if you don't take time off to go clubbing and get all the women and that bad stuff. Even a top shop similar to Harrods paid me pound 75 an hour to sit in a park and wait for my pager to go off, or let me work on my own projects back before the dot-com crash. For example, another guy I worked with drove to London in his roller, sat in the office all day getting paid massively as a Solaris admin, and sat running his Asian companies from our bank office. I miss it now, but since 9/11 I don't feel I can work in the city again and risk losing my entire company. Cantor Fitzgerald. PTSD, I guess. Story 20. As someone who wasn't born into wealth, getting a STEM degree and transitioning into a booming field with high demand, software machine learning, was a good route for me. I consider myself upper middle class since I work for a living, but I'm well on my way to retiring early living off interest of my savings, at which point I'll consider myself rich. Beyond that, live well under your means and invest responsibly. taking advantage of all the tax-advantaged investment vehicles. I don't have the time or technical background to research stocks, and I'm not much of a gambler, so I stick to index funds, like most people should. Story 21. I started cleaning swimming pools when I was in high school. I worked a few different jobs after graduating, and I went to some college. It took me about 3-4 years to actually commit to my side hustle, cleaning pools. After about 8 years of total commitment, I sold my pool service business for $750K. My business had no debt. I enjoyed college, but it's hard for me to stay in one place for too long. The pool service industry suited me well. Do what interests you and what you have some natural advantage in. If you're like me, don't overlook service businesses. You can usually start one with $1K, $10K, and the cash flow the rest of your growth. In hindsight, I wish I would have bought real estate with my business instead of renting our office warehouse. Otherwise, I have no regrets. I have $400K in stocks, making $32K in dividends a year, $100K in cash, $40K in crypto, and since I financed the sale, I get monthly payments of $10K for the next 3 years. Not bragging since I'm not rich, just sharing my experience so hopefully someone else can learn from it. Story 22. I worked all through college and had a bunch of money saved up by the time I was 24. If I had put that money into the S&P 500 when I graduated college, it would be worth $300K by now. I'm 31 years old. Instead, I bought a Porsche, which I love with all my heart. But I could have been a lot richer by now. Don't be afraid of a career that offers slow and steady wins the race type of wealthy. The best plan of action is to get a good career going and do any other business on the side until it's making more than your current job. Your career will teach you business lessons for free, give you a steady income, health insurance. Some industries offer good work-life balance. Then once you have some savings built up from your career and some knowledge in your back pocket, experiment with 5,000 in this idea, 5,000 in that idea, and see what works. Don't go all in right after college on being an entrepreneur. You will make mistakes. You won't have money or security. Story 23. Got lucky with Bitcoin and Ethereum. Not crazy rich, but I'm about to pay off my parents' mortgage and buy a family home for my partner and I to grow into. Edit. $5.2 million turned into actual fiat with $800K left in my portfolio. You can stop asking, speculating now. Story 24. Bought $20 of Bitcoin at 10 cents each, sold $2.7 million of Bitcoin, paid government a-ish load of taxes, still have a bunch of the ish left over. Story 25. I can't speak to myself being particularly wealthy, but I can speak to parents. My mom pulls in $500K plus a year, and my dad could easily do the same, but reinvest the majority of his earning back into his business. I think in total my dad's company is worth $25 million if he were to sell it today. Neither of them came from money, and each were able to individually work their way into their respective financial positions through hard work and a bit of luck. My mom sells commercial printing on commission and has worked at the same company for 24 years. She went to a state school for advertising and stuck with the same company she started with out of college. My dad owns a variety of companies, LLCs and other ventures, all focused on real estate. He got his start doing feasibility studies for a large real estate management company. He was promoted through the ranks and eventually split off to help his friend found a company that would go on to be worth over $1.2 billion. Although he only had a 0.5% stake in the company, we were considerably wealthy. At this point, we would often fly in private jets around the country, and both my parents looked forward to retiring. Then the housing market crashed in 2008, and it was exposed that my dad's original partner had been running a Ponzi scheme, and the company was swimming in debt. Largest fraud case in our state's history. My dad and hundreds of others lost almost everything, with only pennies on the dollar being paid back. If it wasn't for my mom still working, we would have had to sell the house, etc. That's when he decided to work for himself and has developed his own successful string of operating and construction companies. Very little of his wealth is liquid, which is why my mom still works. Essentially, she pays for the bills and vacations and other day-to-day luxuries, while my dad is essentially the retirement plan. This wealth has afforded me many blessings, unsurprisingly. I'm about to graduate from a top 15 university and will be making $77K straight out of college with no debt. Despite my parents' success, they don't forget where they came from. At one point my dad was mechanic/construction worker, and to this day does the majority of the work on our house. He remodeled our kitchen when we first moved in, and now we are restoring an old VW Vanagon together. I can answer any other specifics if you would like. Story 26. I opened a company in around 2009 that basically did property maintenance on foreclosed houses. This company did fairly well, and I made in the low six figures for about 5 or 6 years. I saved most of this money and used it to put my wife through RN school and to buy a couple duplexes. Once my wife got through RN school and started making decent money, $70, $80K, I knew my business had a shelf life, so I closed it down and went to school for my RN. I am 2 months away from graduating and we have been perfectly comfortable on just her salary. Our rentals are almost paid off and the plan is to continue just living off of her salary and sticking my paycheck into more rentals. We are both 34, and based on our current finances, we could retire comfortably by 40, living off of $50, $60K/year that will automatically adjust for inflation. Our plan is to keep doing what we have been for 15 more years until our daughter turns 18, and then we will retire on a nice catamaran. Based on the projections I've done, we should have 14 rental houses paid off by then, and we'll have much more than we need. Story 27. My dad is rich. He just retired with about $7.5 million in assets and cash. Good home, cabin, and rental are paid for. My dad has never bought a brand new car. He has never shopped for clothes anywhere but Walmart. He and his wife don't have updated finishings or kitchen or anything ridiculous. My dad has always been cheap. He's made 6 figures plus since his mid-30s, which is pretty good. But he's never lived as if he had any money. He told me, control your wants because you never stop wanting. Live below your means. And pay yourself first. Story 28. I've worked several industrial jobs in small towns that are dirt cheap to live in. I'm talking like $500 a month for decent 2-bedroom apartments with power bills that are also pretty low, thanks to shared walls reducing heating requirements, and the delivery charges utilities love to tack on are also similarly reduced. Obviously, I'm not spending money constantly landscaping and renovating either. I keep a year's worth of expenses in my current living conditions in liquidity, and the rest I put into investments basically. But the key is that I never even considered trying to get a city job where I might make a little bit more, but my expenses also skyrocket. Instead, after taxes and my expenses are done, I might save anywhere from 3 to 5 months of my monthly expenses per month depending on how much OT I do. Thanks for watching, subscribe for more videos. I'll see you in the next video, take care.